Okay. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thanks for coming along. As I mentioned before, but it wasn't on the recording, this is a webinar run by the Technical Advisory Board to give you an overview of the plenary that happened in Gothenburg last month. This was the 20th RDA plenary and it was our 10-year anniversary, so it's quite a pivotal moment for RDA. And today, myself, I'm Sarah Jones from Giant, and my colleague Ming, who's from ARDC, will present the webinar this morning for us in our time zone. Well, actually, in my time zone, not for Ming. And then we'll have another webinar that's a repeat of this where two other tab members present. I just want to say thanks also to Connie Clare and Alex Delapalta, who did the slides that look more glossy at the start. We have a slight overview of the plenary, so the nice looking slides are ones that they put in there. So to get us started, I actually want to just say a huge thanks to Ming first off. Last time we did this webinar, like a year ago, Ming did all of the data analysis and it was super helpful. And this year I was struggling getting my stuff done. And last night she did my bit of analysis. So when I got up early this morning, I found my work was done. And I just want to say a thanks to her, but also I think that's a real sign of how RDA works. We're all in different time zones and people pick up the baton for each other and it's very helpful. And I think that's a real sign of the true collaboration of RDA. And I'd encourage you to do the same in working groups when your co-chairs or others are clearly struggling with their workload. So what we're going to do in this webinar, we're going to give an overview of the 20th RDA plenary, highlight key outcomes from the different sessions, and we're going to structure that by the plenary pathways. You're probably aware of those, but what we do, because there's so many sessions at RDA, we try to structure them by themes. And that's how we're going to present this webinar as well. And you can see Minfang Wu here, my co-presenter, and then the other two, Gretchen and Raphael, will present the session later on today. And the four of us have done the kind of prep, the analysis for this. So it's been a very collaborative tab effort. So first off, an overview of the plenary. I guess many of you were there, but potentially not all of you. It was a huge plenary. We had 719 participants, lots on site in Gothenburg in Sweden, and also many online. So it's very much a hybrid plenary. I think this is something RDA's doing really excellently. And there were people from many countries, 62 countries across 6 continents. So it is very much a global forum. There were many co-located events. Ironically, that's all I was at RDA for. I did a co-located event on the Monday and then had to leave, so I wasn't at the plenary. But it sounds like it was a really fantastic event, lots of sessions. You can see here the statistics, the number of BOFs, which are new sessions, the birds of feather sessions, lots of interest groups and working groups. And also we're starting to see the communities of practice coming through. So some statistics, you can see here the breakdown between the different session types. The biggest is the interest groups, but there were also BOF sessions, lots of plenary sessions, and I think some of those panels look like they went really well as well. And in terms of the attendance, again, mostly on site, but still a very large online contingent. And it was a real kind of party at the 20th plenary. We had birthday cupcakes for our 10-year anniversary, lots of music, lots of interactive activities so people could contribute to RDA's strategic agenda, and building bridges, trying to bring the community together. I think this photo is of some work that my colleague Najla Rettenberg does on the EOSC Future project, which is about having domain ambassadors and different people having grants to really try and seed RDA work in their communities and to help co-create EOSC, the European Open Science Cloud. At this plenary, obviously, Hilary Hanaho, the Secretary General, gave a welcome. We now have more industry collaboration, so there was a panel on that. Lots of thought-provoking keynotes, and also panels looking at where we've come with RDA, because 10 years is a really kind of pivotal point. What's worked, what hasn't, where are we going to go next? And if you didn't see some of those things, they're all recorded and online, so I'd encourage you to take a look. And there was also lots of good feedback from the community talking about, getting involved in some of those activities and thanking the organizers and particularly Hilary because there's so much rich content, it's quite hard to process it all. So there's a lot on Twitter as well. You can look at the hashtag RDA Plenary and see what happened at the event. So what we're going to do in the webinar today, we're going to present what happened in the different sessions, just very brief summaries, and we're going to do that according to the plenary pathways. We're going to take probably about 5 minutes per pathway, and we're going to have discussion 2 times during the webinar. So we'll take the first pathways, which is around FAIR, data infrastructure and training. That will take us about 20 minutes, and then we'll have some discussion. And then Ming will take over the presentation and cover the data lifecycles, semantics and discipline focused pathways. And again, that will be like about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll close with some closing discussion. You can see the collaborative notes from all of the sessions online, and we asked the chairs to do a little brief summary, just a few bullets, and that's what we've derived the content of this webinar from. So following that Google link, you can go and see all of the session notes. So these are the pathways that we're going to use. I'll pick up on the FAIR ones first, and then there's 3 around data infrastructure at an institutional level, regional and international, and then training. And as I said, then Ming will take over. One of the new pathways this year was research software. So I think we're seeing that as an increasing area of work. And this is how the session split across the different pathways. You can see some pathways had more sessions, particularly the data infrastructure. So a big shout out to Gretchen, who did all of the analysis on those ones. FAIR was also a key topic with 15 pathways. And the number you see in the brackets next to the 15 is how many summaries there were. And this year we found that many of the session organizers did summaries. So it was a much higher proportion. So a huge thanks to all the session chairs as well for actually providing us the content for this webinar. Another thing I'd maybe pick out here is the number of joint sessions on the data infrastructure and environments, the international track of that. That's where there was 4 joint sessions. So it shows this is an area where there's a lot of collaborative activity. And you can see in some areas, the regional and disciplinary infrastructure, and also the discipline-focused data issues, these areas are where we're seeing communities of practice emerge as well, which is really good. This is a new concept at RDA in terms of group structure. So to come on to the first pathway, this is about fair, care and trust. And there was a pathway around the principles. What is it that FAIR means? And in this pathway, we discussed the Fair Digital Object concept, so the FDO concept, and we talked about applying FAIR to different elements, to virtual research environments, machine learning and certification, because FAIR is not just about the object, it's about the environment in which that object is stored and managed. When you see the blue coding here, this is the pathways that had takeaways where people had provided the bullets. Some of them are reported under this pathway, and sometimes you'll see that we've actually covered it in another pathway. So in research software for this first one. So even though it was tagged with FAIR, we reported it in another one. People could pick multiple pathways. There are some, unfortunately, where we didn't have takeaways and we didn't have time to go through all the session notes. So for some of them, you won't get the information, but you can go and look yourself if it's an area that you're interested in. So for the 3 summaries, I'm going to report out here. The first one was about FAIR for machine learning. And this was the first meeting of that group, and they wanted to set a roadmap for FAIR for machine learning. They're trying to build a community of practice around that and also write a white paper. And the key concerns they're looking at are things like ethics and IPR in machine learning, and also how FAIR applies to machine learning. The second group was around software source code and particularly policies and incentives for that. As I mentioned before, there was a new kind of software kind of track. So there's a real increasing interest in research software, and particularly the incentives or initiatives that can really increase the incentives. So there's a group called FAIR for Research Software that's aimed at academic publishers, for example. And then the third one here, the trust principles and certification. This really focused on providing updates of work that's been happening. So they have a call for participation in RDA Tiger, which is a new project in the European context funded by European Commission. And that project is setting up working groups. So there was a call for participation in their working group. They're also looking at new requirements for core trust seal and trust principles and looking at kind of promoting the adoption of that through a working group. So the common themes that came out of this FAIR principles track was that FAIR applies to more than just the objects. And this FAIR digital object concept needs to be defined, but also think about FAIR in other contexts like machine learning or VREs or software. And there was also a fair amount of promotion and endorsement of new outputs. And as I mentioned, new things being delivered like the white paper. The second track, again, was around fair care and trust, but here it was focusing on the adoption, implementation, and deployment. So they were looking at the practices and methods for adoption and how we implement those principles of fair care and trust. There were a ton of sessions in this one, but actually only one that's reported out under this track because there's a lot of overlap. So you can see here lots of sessions were reported in other pathways like in semantics or in the discipline pathway or data lifecycle. So I'm actually only going to report out on one session here, the one on education and training. This is just a list of the other sessions that were in this track. And there was only one actually, which we didn't get a report out for. So to focus on that education and training group, they were really looking at how training can be successful and how you get across and communicate the data management principles effectively. And they had some tips, disguising data management in associated training. So hiding the kind of vegetable. So the zucchini bread approach. So kind of putting the vegetables into the product. So linking RDM training with other related training that researchers may need to do. Also using fantasy or gamification to reimagine training. I think there's been some really good examples there of, using things like Lego bricks to get across the concept of metadata. And also trying to use what's already out there. So look at the existing games or training materials, but there's an understanding that it's sometimes quite hard to know what's applicable. They're also within this group continuing the work on the application profile for minimum metadata for training materials. And I think that's really quite important if we're wanting to pool training resources and to be able to reuse things from different contexts. So, as I mentioned, there were 15 sessions here, but 14 were overlapping with other pathways. So we've only reported out that training one. And because we didn't really have common themes, I thought I'd just give you some of my anecdotes. So I think one of the first lessons is that not everything is about FAIR. Like we seem to put the FAIR tag on lots of things, but also it's linked to data infrastructure or software or other things. There was also a comment I had over the weekend. One of my colleagues, Robin Rice from Edinburgh University, had said it shouldn't be dare, it should be fair, because fair isn't like, well, I'm assuming what she means is that fair isn't a real word. It's kind of made up word. And actually we should be talking about discoverability. So I think all of these concepts and principles, they work for us, but actually, like maybe they need rethinking too. And then I thought I should stop being so opinionated because that's what I tend to do when I'm talking publicly. I think FAIR is a fantastic thing, fantastic concept, and we should try and make sure everything's fair. But I think we've already been living these principles for a number of years before that was conceived. So the second pathway, data infrastructure and environments, this had 3 tracks: institutional, regional, and international. And as I mentioned at the start, Gretchen had an awful lot to do, lots of analysis. There are a ton of sessions in this pathway, so I'm not going to go into details. But in terms of institutional, this was looking at the workflows and methods to implement fair care and trust principles at that institutional data infrastructure level. So let me go, you've just got a list of the sessions here. And again, we've highlighted which ones we reported out on. And there are also, oh, I'm confused here. We're listing all the sessions, the regional and disciplinary. Oh, let me go forward. And the international. And then we come to the summaries. Sorry, I'd ordered it differently in my one. So the first session summaries here, there was a sensitive data group, and they were providing a glossary of terms on sensitive data. So that's a useful output that you could look at. Within the second group that's reported out here, the Earth, Space and Environmental Sciences, they have a number of projects underway, and there are a number of takeaways from that group. So they were having difficulties around complex citation and coordination, and they were setting up new project infrastructures. And there was a struggle to get the visibility of these Earth, space and environmental science projects from the Global South. So that's one of the areas they wanted to focus on. So if you're in the Global South or, you have links there, please do try and point people to this group because they really want to try and engage beyond, where they already have good activity. The third session that's reported out here was on the role of middleware in data and metadata management and looking specifically at iRods as a technology there. They found that there was a strong potential of middleware in helping research institutions manage their research data and the associated metadata. And lots of the examples that were presented in the session picked up on iRods. There were a few takeaways from that, thinking about the cost for institutions, the need to have intermediaries such as data stewards, and also the need to educate and raise trust among researchers for the different data management solutions. And then the fourth one here was looking at the trusted research environments for sensitive data. And this one, they were trying to draft a new charter for a working group and are looking for participants. So if you're interested in sensitive data and TREs, there's a new group trying to get set up here. So do follow up on that. So those were the institutional summaries. I'll now go on to what was happening at the regional and disciplinary level in terms of data infrastructure and environments. The first group here was the Fair Data Maturity Model. You may be familiar with this. It set up the kind of indicators for assessing FAIR. And here they were exploring what steps could be taken for instruments and data capture. And there were, again, some important takeaways. It's important to record the information about the instrument and how that data collection took place. They are also looking at PIDs for instruments as a group around that, because I think that's also important to contribute. And obviously, there's a critical role for the instrument vendors in this context. We need to work with them to make sure that we're then able to get the right things in place to assess the fairness. There was also a group that was looking at data for the Sustainable Development Goals and responsible research. And within this group, a number of the takeaways were looking at sharing experience on Sustainable Development Goal indicator data. How do we actually measure the SDGs? And there was a lot of reflections about, different regions, so the South-South and the North-South collaboration and different open access initiatives. And they wanted to generate debate and insights on the current status of the Sustainable Development Goals and a semantic infrastructure for representing the different goals and targets. And then when we come to the international summaries, there were three groups that we're reporting out on here. The first one was GORC. I see Andrew Trelaw's been put in the chat. This is something Andrew Trelaw and I are involved in. So GORC is the Global Open Research Commons. And Karen Payne has been leading the charge to develop this attribute model. So that was presented on in the session. We also ran a workshop around that on the Friday. And lots has been happening within the working group. We're going to start phase 2 of the activity now. And within the session at the plenary, we also worked with the EOSC Finnish Forum and CSC's contribution to the FAIR Core for EOSC project and GRASP OS. because we're looking at how the Finnish research community can contribute into the EOS development and their alignment with what we're trying to do on the global open research commons generally. The second group here is around community engagement and trying to find community engagement that works. Here they picked up on different engagement successes and the challenges from current and former funded work. So as I mentioned, we have domain ambassadors in Europe for RDA. There's also the Data Curation Network, and the Australian Research Data Commons has done work around engagement too. Some of the key takeaways was the importance of community engagement managers, improvements that are needed to the RDA output system. I think it's quite hard to know what outputs there are or to find ones that are relevant to you. And the plenary pathways were mentioned as a useful way to navigate those different outputs. And then the third group here, the data repository attributes, they've been drafting, repository attributes and are looking for feedback. So do follow this link and provide feedback if you're working in repositories, because they're wanting to improve the documentation there. So the common themes, as I mentioned, the data infrastructure and environments pathways were probably the heaviest ones with the most sessions. So there are quite a few themes to come out. There are several groups within these this area really working on the outputs and the adoption. There were lots of overlapping activities for the earth, space and environmental sciences. So they're considering being a community of practice. For lots of these groups, sustainability was a factor. I think it isn't even just on these areas. I think sustainability is generally an issue, but particularly because this is about infrastructure, that came out strongly in this pathway. The commons model, so the what we were talking about, the global open research commons, we found that fitted at many different scales, and community engagement really came out as a very important factor. And because this pathway, I think it's really quite a cross-cutting one, there's infrastructure at disciplinary level, institutional, regional, global. We saw lots on the kind of regional and international angles of that work. And I think that's really the benefit of the RDA as a forum, because it is global forum. So naturally, we're all building infrastructure in our own geographic spaces, and this is a way to share what we're doing. So the final pathway I'll report on, so I think I'm just about on time for the half hour, is training in data stewardship. Here, there were again a number of sessions, and we've highlighted the ones we're reporting out on. So to mention the couple here, there's 4 session summaries. One was the co-data schools. They're trying to streamline their group processes. And also to reach out to other teaching organizations. These co-data data science schools have been running for a long time now, and they're trying to really embed their curriculum, and also to attract reviewers for the different school materials. And the presenter this afternoon, Raphael, is one of the instructors on those courses. We then also had a birds of a feather session about promoting synergies between national RDM and data stewardship networks. One of the key outcomes there was that there's lots of national networks. We can learn from one another because there's lots of work going on in different contexts, and we can share our models. And then the other 2 training sessions, one was the way to be fair from data collection to citation. And some key reflections there. It's a huge undertaking to make everything machine readable and interpretable, and we need to consider if this is necessary. I think generally FAIR is quite a difficult concept to apply. It takes time and effort. So we also need to think about selection. Where is it sensible to apply that? Is it, just to a subset that's really valuable and should be reused? And when we're thinking about interoperability, we need to think about interoperable with what, because to develop those pathways or crosswalks between standards is also hard. And there was lots of interest in the room and amongst virtual attendees to develop a working group on this. And then the Libraries for Research Data Interest Group, we're looking at supporting the UNESCO Open Science recommendations. And here they were looking at promoting the international and multi-stakeholder cooperation, which again is, ideal for the RDA forum. So the common themes that came out about training, some of the groups had reinvigorated that discussion on reproducibility, data maturity, PIDs and open science. And there was a lot of global collaboration opportunities, both within RDA and outside. There's lots of parallel organizations that, we should be collaborating with. So there was a need to promote the international and multi-stakeholder cooperation. And then this network of partners was also felt to be needed to increase the training and improve the outreach and the quality of the training. So that is a very rapid summary of the first 6 pathways, I think it was. And now we come to a bit of discussion time. I haven't fully managed to read the chat as I've been going through, but what we're interested in is whether how did you find the sessions in these 6 pathways? If you attended any, what was most illuminating for you? Are there things we didn't reflect from people's bullets? Are there key outputs you want to engage in? Any gaps you see or things that we didn't present that you want to reflect on? So by all means, raise a hand and speak out. And I'll look at chat as we go. So Andrew saying the summaries are useful. And we could maybe do it at the event. I think that was the only main comment. Or one around the training. Does anyone want to speak out and make any reflection? Because we don't want to only speak at you. Everyone. Oh yeah, Francoise, go ahead.
Yes, it's just something which has been said many times, but I have seen several sessions in which the audience had to be very active. For instance, the data repository attribute session, where people were asked to gather by stakeholder type and to work on the proposal. And it's just to insist on the fact that it's very important when it's possible to have this kind of engagement of the participants. So it's a bit more difficult when it's a hybrid session, but it's really good, and it makes people feeling that it's good that they are here to do something.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's the thing. RDA is a working forum, it should be active working meetings. So definitely where you can, sometimes you need to just present updates. But I think the more we can get people interactive, the better. And some groups are very good at that. So we can maybe get their lesson shared across. Other things in the chat. Yeah, Connie says she was also in that session, and it makes it easier to get involved as a newcomer. Yeah. Okay. I think if there's no other questions now, we do have another discussion slot at the end. So I'm going to stop screen share and hand over to Ming, and she'll run you through the rest of the pathways. Excellent.
Sarah, is my slides okay?
Yes, sorry, I just muted. Yeah, we see them.
Okay, so I will walk you through the rest of 4 pathways. So first, the data lifecycle pathways. It covers many activities from the data description, versioning, capture provenance information, granularity issues, to publishing, citing dataset, and reward. So we have 9 sessions in this pathway. Here we will walk through those 6 sessions that provide takeaways. So first one is a session on practical approaches to track the communication and communicating the use of research data. So basically the group recognize there is progress made for measuring and tracking data usage, but many challenges remains. So opportunity can emerging from demonstrating the tools and the service for measuring and tracking data usages. So give some demonstration to demonstrate the effect. And the second session run by sharing rewards and credit. That's toward implementing recommendations. So again, they recognize that rewarding pathways are not well known, and the guidance would be helpful, but this guidance or recommendations should have a group picture in scope that should including all stakeholders, because it's hard to separate rewarding issues, for example, separate from funding bodies to publishers to research organizations, so should have holistic views. The next session run by Data Discovery Paradigm Interest Group. So I'm also involved with the session. The session devoted probably 80% of time to have participant discussion on these recommendations for data repository to improve data discoverability, because so much time spent on discussion. So in the end, we got a lot of input from participants who were not able to join the group's monthly call during the time across different regions. So after the session, there are lots of people joining the interest group. We hope there are more hands and fresh ideas to progress this recommendation work. So next one, the data granulation working group, they're working on the guidance document from 4 aspects: metadata schemas and content, policy, data discovery access, and citation. And the have two participants indicating as a potential adopters of the guidance, and also identified the synergies with other group. Data versioning group, they focus on how to develop practical or actionable guidelines from the data versioning principle that was outcome from previous data versioning working group. Again, participants helped to identify the collaboration with a number of other groups as displayed here. So there was even a suggestion for all related groups to organize a workshop to sometime in the middle of this year to discuss the overlapped issue. I'm also co-chair of this interest group. So after this session, we all reckon this is the best plenary session we had, recently. And the next one, data citation working group, that's a long-standing working group from the RDA. The group had an output on citing arbitrary subset of dynamic data set, and since then they have been used these plenary sessions to demonstrate the adoption user cases and seek more user cases for adoption, and also through the adoption user cases, they went back revise the earlier recommendations. So this is very good user cases for this working group to seek adoption. So the common themes for this pathway, so data life cycle, this pathway has diverse topics, and where each focus on the different stage of data activities. But all group had positive feedback, which can help advance the current activities and or adoption of existing outputs. The topics about reward and credit was discussed in 4 out of 6 sessions. So that's probably some collaboration could be lying up there. And indeed, many sessions identify the need for collaborations. Okay, next, semantics, ontology, and standardization pathway. So there are 12 sessions in this pathway. We will walk through the about six of them and in these pathways. So actually 7. Oops, what happened? So first, the vocabulary service interest groups, they revisit their group activities, want to keep group alive and keep the monthly meetings. So if you are interested in vocabulary service, you can sign up to the this interest group and follow the monthly meeting. National PID strategy working group, they now finalize the output about the national PID strategy checklist, and they are about to finish this work and transition to the interest group. So if you are working on PID strategy, so you can go have a look of that checklist and provide feedback. The previous PID is on strategy, and this one working with PID in with tools and infrastructure to implement PID. So in their session, they outline the use cases and explore challenges and want to pull resources to provide a reference and guidance to chart the way forward. So if you have any experience of implemented or tools or any infrastructure from PID, you can involved in this interest group. Blockage framework working group, they have an update and finalize their output. So it's a collaboration session with fair call for EOSC and a fair impact, and then they prepare formal output for adoption at the plenary, next plenary. But if you intend to adopt, you can involve earlier. This session increases the positive impact on journal policy on data sharing practice. So there was a data availability statement out in 2023. They recognized there was issue with the statement quality, so they agree needed to make this statement machine readable. Actually, they are looking for people, especially the publisher, to sign up to work on the issues of code policy. The session on practical implementation of IDOP framework and feature directions. So the they produced the framework before, but they had an extension and looking for feedback, where the due date is March 31 last month, but I believe if you get on the GitHub, you can still provide feedback. And they plan to organize a modeling workshop for implementers. Next, the Open Science Graphs interest group. They identify the core data model for the to resolve the interoperability issues of scholarly knowledge graphs. Like an open citation, DataCite, and a research graph described their adoption plan. That's good. Adoption for output. So common themes of these pathways, they all talk about the interoperability and the discoverability, about schemas, crosswalk, ontology, very focused pathways, and almost all sessions identify activities to follow, and there is this pitch, and they balanced the high-level strategy and the implementation issues, and also on the ontology and the vocabularies, there was also discussion on balance between general recommendation and how apply that to domain-specific issues, and their recognition that meshing accessibility and readability of those ontologies schemas are very important. Okay, the second and last pathways, that's a discipline-focused data issues. There are 8 sessions. We will go through 5 sessions here. So I get is I think the only one community of practice here. They identified there will be possible 2 working groups, created 2 working groups, and also I possibly the connection with the earth science interest group that probably they propose to start a COP. That's collaboration opportunities here. And the next one is join the session on infrastructure supporting the fair data principles. So in that session, they shown and explore the 15 the infrastructure's use cases, and they propose to move forward on the development of guideline for fair improvement. And so there will be regular meetings set up. Again, if you are working in this area, please sign up to this life science data interest group, infrastructure interest group. You will get a lot of each meeting. The next 2, one is on chemistry research data. That's opportunities for cross-community operation on the trying to agree on standard for describing samples in chemistry that align with wide initiatives. And these are also similar themes for the data representation in material and materials and chemicals. They identify need to ensure general recommendations are to be utilized, and the domain-specific domain-specific recommendations can elaborate in a proposed working group. Last one, this use is a new emerging theme on user-centered surveys for collection as data at the Library of Congress. So Library of Congress staff, they're looking for the cultural heritage data. They will follow up with digital repository of Ireland on their work, and also following up with other initiatives in RDA Europe on possible next step. Okay, the common themes for this pathway. So they focus on the interoperability and the standards with a discipline focus, but also consider and adopt the general recommendations while they develop their discipline ones. And again, there is a collaboration opportunity there with groups in and outside of RDA. Okay, the last pathway, research software, there are 4 sessions here, and these 2 sessions already mentioned in Sarah's fair care and trust principles, so I will not elaborate on that, but just call out that the machine learning, favorable machine learning ones working on white paper to make a machine learning fair. So if you have any experience with machine learning, with metadata schema and a pitch, you could contribute to the writing up of this white paper. And there are 2 buffs. I think make code data visible. So there are lots of effort invested to make a software code visible, but still there are cultural, reluctance to share. So the approach they want to take is to identify those good enough practice, then to share this good practice widely and global disseminated to encourage other people to follow. And this session, computational reproducibility, there is a historical reproducibility interest group from RDA before. So this both identify values to establishing and coordinating function about the same topic. As this topic has been discussed somewhere else, there are many external efforts. Probably RDA is a forum to join those efforts, to work together. So they will looking for whether it should be new activities in the RDA. So if you are very interested in this computational reproducibility, please talk to the BOF organizer. There are more support. Probably they will support. They will start an interest group or working group towards. Okay, so common themes. There need to accelerate the adoption and implementation of RDA output, specifically the fair for research software principles. So clearly there is growth interest in software from RDA community and also elsewhere. So this pathway discussed the citation and issues of software artifacts and discussed the metadata for machine learning models. There is another pathway called others. Actually, they all included in other pathways. So to save time, I will not cover them here. So, Sarah, do you want me to go through these slides, or you want to take over?
I don't mind. We can kind of do it collectively if you like. So we can move this to the other screen. So let me move it back. Here we go. So yeah, as I'd kind of alluded to at the start, there were some pathways that were bigger than others. Data infrastructure and environments, fair implementation and semantics were those kind of top pathways. And we found that there were BOFs, so birds of a feather, in every pathway. So lots of emerging work and new ideas. Many of the working groups had identified potential adopters of their group's output, which I think is really important because adoption doesn't just happen. You know, you need to make sure you're trying to think about the end user as well and promote it in the right places. And I think one thing we've seen, which is maybe just showing the maturity of RDA, is that there's a lot of desire to collaborate, not just within RDA with other groups, but also with other initiatives outside of RDA. As I mentioned, there are parallel fora like Go Fair. There's lots of other kind of infrastructures or groups set up, and there's a desire for people to kind of do work across those different boundaries. We also saw a theme coming up that people wanted to work with other regions, particularly the Global South, which I think is really positive to see. Sometimes we end up with working groups where there's just, you know, a North American, a European, or an Australian chair, but this is not the entire world. We need to draw in the rest of Asia and the Global South and Latin America. So I think it's really important we try and promote that because it can be harder for people in those communities to engage. And in terms of the different group activities, we have different group structures in RDA. So the BOFs to kind of seed new ideas, interest groups as a kind of, you know, an umbrella holding area for a particular topic, working groups to have specific activities developed around a topic. And now there's also this community of practice concept. And we're seeing transitions between those groups. So interest groups often spin out specific working groups to do key things, but we're also seeing groups thinking about how they can evolve into communities of practice. So I think there's some interesting conclusions there. One thing we're keen to hear from you, there's already been some comments in the chat that people find this pathway summary useful and have asked for the recording, and we will certainly share that. It'll go up on the website ASAP. But it's useful to hear whether this is an activity you think we should continue. We also have had questions at the past whether we should do it at the plenary, which would be amazing because then people are there and there's chance to follow up. But I think it takes quite a lot to try and pull out the common thread. So we'd need to think about a different way to structure that if we did it at the plenary. So there are conclusions. And then we also just have the same discussion slide as the next slide, I think. Yeah. So we can, you know, we can open it to just discussion for the remainder of the time here. We only have 5 minutes left, but if you want to discuss, and we can also stay on a bit longer if anybody wants. I don't know if anyone has a reflection or wants to raise a hand, Françoise.
I am sorry, I will complain. I am very sad because the session, the BOF about evaluation of research was not cited. And I
Did
think
you not do bullets?
it's too much about policies, probably. It's not technical enough. But it was, the room was full, and the group, the future interest group webpage was open yesterday. So I will put
cool.
I
put the link in the chat.
information in there is really lots of interest, and I will put the link to the group webpage in the chat so that people can already become a member. We have someone who registered to be a member during the night, so which is relatively incredible. Sorry.
Well, apologies from our end if we missed a pathway. As I said, it was, you know, quite a frantic activity trying to do all the analysis.
I understand very well, so it's not a big complaint. I understand fully the difficulty. I think there may be a need at some point to have a pathway which is about policies.
Yeah.
Because it's
there's quite a lot.
towards RDA, And it may help for these kind of things also.
Yeah, and I think that links in with Funders Forum because there's policies around like the publisher policies, the different data management policies, and also this research evaluation is a growing activity area. You know, how do we really get the incentives for open science because they're not built into the system? Oh, and Connie's saying July is policy month as part of our decade of data. So actually that's well placed. So we should certainly be promoting those new groups in that in the events in July. But yeah, I think policy could be a plenary pathway. And actually, if anyone has other ideas about pathways, you know, because some of them are very full, like the data infrastructure ones, maybe we need to think of another way to break those up to make it more meaningful for people. So there might be other themes that we use in future plenaries. Other comments or questions? I think we'll maybe move to the last slide, Ming, just while we're talking. So the one before. A final thing we wanted to tell you is the BOF sessions. So BOFs are, you know, a way for people to seed new ideas. And these were the topics that came up in BOFs this year. So synergies in terms of national RDM and data stewardship, looking at fairness for closed data, because fair doesn't mean open. It's also about data that's restricted, things about code sharing, computational reproducibility. So these potentially are areas that will evolve into working groups and interest groups, but there might also be topics that you expected to see at RDA and they weren't covered. And as TAB, we're very interested in that because maybe we can try and find relevant people and suggest a BOF is run. One that came out of discussion with myself and Rob Quick was around digital twins. There's a lot of work going on in developing digital twins currently. So that's maybe an area for a group in future. So that's also something that would be useful to get feedback on you from. I don't know if we have a feedback form from this webinar, but it might be quite helpful so that if you have reflections that come, you know, as you're thinking about things, then we can pick that up. A comment from Amanda Lawrence, was there anything on data donation? I don't actually know. I know we covered sustainability for RDA itself, but do you mean data donation like deposit? I don't know if you can unmute.
Sorry, not as in money, as in data donation in terms of people donating their personal data. So it's happening in health, it's happening in social media sort of more recently, but yeah, there's lots of sort of programs where, you know, patients donate their data, citizen science kind of area, but I'm particularly looking at how you can use data donation for social media platforms and other sorts of online platforms that you can't get access to commercial data otherwise.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting because, I mean, the legislation is there to protect people, but actually it can make it hard to license things openly or to share them and donate them. So yeah, that sounds like a really good topic for a BOF. It covers social media and health, like you say. And I think it's the kind of ethos that a lot of RDA people would want, you know. I don't know if other people are organ donors, but that idea of contributing to science with your own content in some way. Yeah, okay, nice idea. Any final comments or reflections from Ming or anyone else? No?
Sarah, I just wanted to say to you and Ming and also others in TAB and also Alex, thank you very much for putting this webinar together and undertaking such a detailed analysis because I imagine it took a long time. So thank you.
Ironically, it doesn't take that long. It actually just always comes at a time when you're busy with other things. I think we're always so busy with the plenary that then the time after it, we're playing catch up. So
yeah, but it's really wonderful.
We scheduled
so I've really
it a month
enjoyed it.
after, but still it takes, yeah. No, and it's good fun to do as well, actually. We learn a lot as TAB because we can't make all the sessions and it's a good thing for the community too. So hopefully you found it useful and have some links to go and follow up. Thank you all for being here. And actually, I see Raphael's on the call. Raphael will be taking over the baton and presenting later today. So good luck, Raphael. And yeah, thanks to everyone who was part of it. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. I will fix typo.
Yeah, no,
Digital reports
I'm sure there was typos in mine as well.
Yeah.